Luke tonight. Get chapter 15 opened up in front of you if you would. Luke chapter 15, if you would. And I will say that I am incredibly appreciative not only of your attendance tonight, but the emphasis that we've all sensed. I trust you've sensed it, the pastor's leadership tonight, to put out the desire to say, Lord, meet with us, speak to us, do for us what only you can do. I greatly appreciate that emphasis. And I rejoice with you as a church family for what the Lord is doing. How great it is to know a man just walks in and meets pastor, and it came as a result of someone knocking on the door and just inviting him to come. And then, of course, the baptism yesterday and just the Lord meeting with us yesterday. And so everything is just a great blessing. And it is a great joy to introduce my wife to you tonight, my sweet wife, Lynn, sitting down here on the second row. We've been married for 45 years. I always catch myself. I don't know why. I have never failed to remember how many years we've been married until just this last year. And I don't know why. I keep getting 44 in my head, but it's 45. And of course, you know, when you got married at the age of 3, like I was, it's hard to remember those things. And so, you know, and so I won't preach on lying tonight. So I should be safe with all that little explanation. Lynn and I, we get asked a lot, where are we from? Lynn is originally from Florida. She is a Florida Panhandle girl. She grew up in that area. Her dad was a pastor in the area of the Panhandle of Florida, and also in southern Alabama for a while, and then also in the state of Tennessee. And then we met in Bible college, and we've got 2 boys. I mentioned them to you yesterday, and they're all over. We've got one in Reno, Nevada, starting a church, and a businessman son in Kansas City, Missouri, with 7, count them, 7 grandkids. How many of you are grandparents? Or how many of you are grandparents? Is that not the coolest place in the world to be? I'm telling you, there's nothing like it. They didn't tell me. I think they tried to tell you how good it was, but boy, you know, I kept thinking when we had our first one, I said, man, I don't know if I'm old enough to be a grandfather. But boy, when that little precious girl started laughing at everything I said, you know, I mean, I got over that quickly, and I began to love that little precious life, and now it's been multiplied 7 times over. Well, enough of that. Don't get me started on all of the grandkids. Earlier today, Pastor and I had the joy of fellowshipping and solving world problems, and if we can get anybody to listen to us. But the truth is, I'm just joking, we just sitting and talking and fellowshipping and rejoicing in the goodness of the Lord. The subject matter of teaching and giving out the Bible came up, especially to our kids. And the subject matter of the stories of the Bible came up. And I mentioned to him how much I have always made much of the stories of the Bible. I'm a person who loves to see things visually. I think most people are. I think most of us enjoy being able to see things in a picturesque way. And Jesus was a master at telling a story. In fact, the story we're going to look at tonight is, to me, the prince, the highest level of all the stories. It's called a parable that he ever told. A parable is an earthly story that has a heavenly meaning. And Jesus uses a brevity of words, which I wish I could possess. But he uses a shortness and an economic use of words to tell us a story that I suppose everybody in this room knows. Everybody in this room probably knows the story we're going to look at, and I'm going to read to you here in just a moment. From the youngest to the oldest, you've probably been told this story. In fact, if you had a dollar bill for every time somebody ever taught or preached, spoke, or emphasized this particular story, you'd have a lot of dollar bills. For most of us, we've heard it a lot. Let's get the background, and then we'll read the story. The background starts in verse 1 of Luke 15. Notice what it says. Then drew near unto him all the publicans and sinners for to hear him. Now, you may want to pause and say, no, wait a minute. Isn't everybody a sinner? Yes. And what the statement is meaning here is that publicans were, it's not Republicans, it's publicans. It was the tax collectors, those who were hated and despised by everyone because they cheated you out of money. And they got you to pay taxes, and they made money. They charged you more than what you really probably deserved or needed to have to pay. The sinners that's mentioned here were the people that worked for and with these tax collectors, who were the arm twisters who said, yes, you will pay. You will pay. I mean, it's a term that I guess that maybe it's a harsh term, but it would be a term that we would call someone a thug today. Now, that's a harsh term, I know, and it's often bantered about in some inappropriate way. But the fact is, these were men who were, I guess we could say, mafia-like. These were rough, tough, money-grabbing sinners. Notice what they did. They drew near to Jesus. For what purpose? For to hear him. In fact, the construction of the language says that the numbers of them grew and the approach to him advanced. Get the picture. They couldn't get enough of what he was saying. I love that. Verse 2. And the Pharisees and scribes murmured, saying, This man receiveth sinners and eateth with them. He even sits down and has a meal with them. What is he doing? You see, the Pharisees, these religious, can I tell you, the word really means separatist. Now, I'm a separatist, but these were separatists on steroids. They separated, they said things that were literally absurd. They said on the Sabbath day, if you got a tack in your shoe, you couldn't wear those shoes because you were carrying a weight on the Sabbath day. I mean, ridiculous teachings that they came up with. These people who were religionists, who didn't recognize who Jesus was, they found fault with the fact that he cared for these tax collectors and the sinners that worked with them. So with that backdrop in mind, Jesus tells one parable. I'm not going to argue. Someone may say there's three stories here. There are three parts to the story. We're going to only look at the last part. The first part of the parable is the story of a shepherd who loses a sheep, and he goes out and he looks for that one lost lamb. And then the second part of the story is about a woman who loses a silver coin. And in her house, she sweeps, and then she lights a lamp. And when she finds it, she calls her neighbors and friends and says, "Rejoice with me. I found this very special piece of silver." And it was of great value to her. Probably didn't have a lot of monetary worth, but it was of great value to her. And now here's the story that I suppose we all know. Jesus is telling this, beginning in verse 11. Look at it. And he said, "A certain man had two sons. And the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together." He had no intention of coming back. "He gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous, loose, profligate living, prodigal living. And when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine." Jews had nothing to do with swine, but here he is feeding them. "And he would fain," that means gladly, he would gladly have filled his belly with the husk that the swine did eat. No man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and leftovers to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I'll say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him, and had compassion, and ran, and fell on his neck, and kissed him. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, by the way, the father interrupted his confession. He had one more thing he was going to say, but the father heard enough. But the father said to his servants, bring forth the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet, and bring hither the fatted calf, the calf that we have fattened up, and kill it. Let's eat, and be merry, for this my son was dead, and is alive again. He was lost, and is found. And they began to be merry. Now his elder son was in the field, and as he came and drew nigh to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants, and he asked what these things meant. And he said unto him, well, thy brother's come, and thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he's received him safe and sound. And he was angry, and would not go in. Therefore came his father out and entreated him. And he answering said to his father, Lo, that word means look, look, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment. And yet thou never gavest me a kid, a small young goat, that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this thy son was come, which hath devoured thy living with harlots, thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. And he said unto him, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad. For this thy brother was dead, and is alive again, and was lost, and is found. Jesus is a master at telling a story. But you just got to throw yourself into that culture to imagine what it would have been like to have heard it. You see, in that crowd of people that Jesus was speaking, and he tells this particular story, were these Pharisees, these religious separatists to an nth degree, who didn't believe that Jesus was the sent one, and these scribes that were legalists of a height, the degree that they were writing down the law and saying things that whatever they wrote they considered to be the truth, and they were listening to Jesus tell this story. And so when Jesus tells it, he talks about this man who has two sons, and this youngest boy walks in. Boys and girls, you've heard this story. And he comes in and he holds out his hand, or maybe both hands, and he says, you know, Dad, I wish you were dead. That's really what he's saying. He says, because if you were dead, I could get my inheritance, what I'm going to get out of you. But I don't want to wait till you die. I want it right now. So figure out, what would I be receiving if you were dead right now, and let me have it, because I want my independence, I want my inheritance, and I want it immediately. And so the father gave it to him. Now you got to remember, Jesus is telling this. And those Pharisees, you can see them looking around at each other saying, what kind of a father is this? Why, they should have picked up stones and started stoning that boy for talking to his dad like that. Why, that boy has no business doing that. Father gives him his inheritance, what's called the futures. And he takes his inheritance and probably takes it in the matter of how much cattle he would receive and how much land he would receive. And then he banked it up into the bank and figured out how much it was going to be, and he took the funds out of it and took off running to, the Bible, Jesus said, the far country. I can remember when I was a little youngin', when I was a little munchkin, when I was a little kid, they used to tell this story. Am I going to date myself here? On a flannel graph board. Can I get a witness? Does anybody know what a flannel graph board is? All right. I'm a dinosaur. And all of us who knows what it is. You remember before we had images thrown up on a screen, we had a flannel graph board where they put pictures up on the board in Sunday school class, vacation Bible school or something. And they all had serious looks. They all wore robes, and they all reminded me of my pajamas because of the stripes in the robe. And they all had beards, men, women, children. They just all, that's the way I remember it. They all looked the same. In fact, I think I had one teacher who she didn't have a lot of variety. She slapped a picture up in one week. That guy was Moses. Next week, same guy. He was David who killed the giant. And the next week, it was Esther. I may be stretching that just a little bit. But anyway, somewhere along the way on a flannel graph board, I heard the story of this prodigal son. And you may have done the same thing. You may have told it. Give me my inheritance. And then I heard him say, boys and girls, he left his dad, he left the place of righteousness, and he went to the far country. Now those teachers didn't tell us all that got involved with what would happen in the far country. Probably trying to protect us. It's strange though, I remember a picture on the flannel graph board of that boy off in the far country. He was sitting there, he had a liquor bottle sitting on the table. And there was a musical note behind his head, which meant he was at a place where there was a raucous music going on. I don't know why they did this to little boys and girls, but there was a loose woman sitting on his lap. I'm thinking, I look back on that now and I'm thinking, no, that's not good to put that in front of children. But anyway, there we were. And but we were told, now boys and girls, when you get away from God, you make some bad decisions. Oh, you're going to go to the far country. You get away from church, and you get away from the Bible, you get away from godly people, you get away from God. You're going to make some bad decisions. You're going to go to the far country. Then I became a teenager. Well, they're a little more abrupt and a little bit stronger when they're much stronger when they're preaching to young people. They pound the pulpit and slap it and slap lift a foot and lift a hand and lift a fist, and they say, teenagers! You get away from God. You're going to do things you never thought you'd do. You're going to get to the far country. You're going to wind up in jail. You're going to wind up stealing. You're going to wind up in drug addiction. You're going to wind up in alcoholism. You're going to become a drunk. You're going to live in immorality of all sorts. And you know something? I'm so glad that they taught us those things. I really am. I'm glad that somebody pounded a pulpit and preached that when I was a small kid and when I became a teenager, because it helped me to remember as I got older and face temptation, because that temptation to go to the far country is ever present. It's ever present. Now, you've all heard the story, and Jesus has told it to us here again. And then the Bible tells us not only about his rebellion, we see his repentance. What happens? He's out there when he runs out of the end of all of his money, and he's out there feeding hogs. Remember, Jesus is telling this. I can imagine the Pharisees are going, how much lower could this boy go? He's hanging out with hogs and pigs. I mean, Orthodox Jew was to have nothing at all to do with swine. No, nothing at all. And they were thinking, he's out there feeding hogs. He's as low as a person can get. This is horrible. And Jesus is saying he's out there slopping the hogs, and he wished that he could get some of the pods and break them open and squeeze out the juice out of them and have something to eat. And it dawns on him, wait a minute. My dad hires employees on a daily basis, and they eat better than this. Well, I don't deserve to be his son. You see what's happening? He's being broken. He goes, I don't deserve to be his son. I don't deserve to have the privileges of his son. But I can go and be a servant. I can go live out in the barn, and I can eat better than this. I can get a sandwich every day. I can do better than this. I think I'll just go home. And as he's going home, he's practicing his 3-point outline. Father, I've sinned against God and you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired servants. But verse 20 tells us that the father saw his boy coming. That meant a lot to me when I was a young person. But when I became a dad, it meant a whole lot more to me. And I'm telling you something, I still can't get over it. It means more to me now than I think it ever has. The father was looking for his son. He was looking for him. And when he saw him coming, oh, I know people would say, and I think it's legit, maybe he was fearful that people in the town were going to pick up giant stones. They knew who that boy was. They knew he had broken his dad's heart. They knew, we'll stone this boy. Maybe he was running out there to protect him. But not only do you see this boy's repentance, you see the reception of the Father. Can I say this to anybody who's never come to the Father by way of Jesus Christ? Now hear this. You have never, ever been loved like you're loved by God. Nobody loves you as much as God the Father does. This story tells us the picture of the doctrine of grace. That sounds like big words, doesn't it? It's the teaching of God's undeserved grace and kindness and mercy to anyone that would come to Him by faith. Did you know that this story illustrates something else? It illustrates there is no one too far away from God that cannot be redeemed, who cannot be saved, who cannot be rescued. Nobody. Nobody. It's a beautiful story of redemption. Now, I need you to go back and look at verse 11 with me, would you? And I want you to notice that Jesus started off this portion of the story, and I need you to help me. You can say it out loud when I ask you to. He said, a certain man had how many sons? Two sons. You know something? When I was a kid, I always heard about the boy who ran off who lived in rebellion. He messed up his life, and he was off in the far country. And I'm glad I was taught that. But I don't think, as best I recall, anybody ever said anything to me about the other brother. There's another boy in this story. And the truth is, I've been preaching about him for several years now, many years, and I just decided that tonight I think it's time for us to be reviewing because Morris needs the review. And I think many of us need to be reminded of why did Jesus bring up this other boy? There's a whole other portion of this story. He's the boy who never left home. And you know, at first glance, he kind of looks good. He didn't say, Dad, give me my inheritance. I'm going to break your heart and I'm going to leave home. No, he worked for Dad. I think working is a good quality. A good work ethic is something that everybody needs to have. I think that's good. He worked for his dad, no question about it. He was a good guy. You know, when you put this boy who stayed home next to the boy who went off in rebellion, this boy looks like a saint. I mean, he looks really good. In fact, he goes on to say, Dad, you never gave me a small goat that I could have killed and had a feast and celebrated it with my friends. So he's got friends. So he's not a recluse. He's not some guy who has nothing to do with anybody. So he's got some kind of a personality. I mean, I would imagine people in that area, as Jesus told the story, probably people would have looked at that boy and said, no, there's a decent kid. Now, there's a good boy. I'm telling you, there's a church attending or Sabbath serving, synagogue attending young man who sings all the songs like he's supposed to sing them. He's done well, boy, that other boy. What a heartbreak he is. What a terrible story there is behind him. But oh, this kid right here, Jesus is telling a story about two boys. This boy looked real good, but I got news for you. He wasn't godly at all. And he represents the Pharisees and the scribes that were there listening to Jesus tell the story. I'm reading between the lines here. I'm using what I call my sanctified imagination. But I got the sense that these guys that were listening to Jesus tell the story, I got a feeling that when he started talking about this other boy, I got a feeling some of them said, finally, somebody in this story that makes sense. Somebody that's a good kid. I like this because he represented what they were. And yet Jesus was telling the story because of the attitudes of the Pharisees and the scribes. And I'm looking at people who are here on a Monday evening for which I am extremely grateful, who would say probably in a heartbeat, Morris, I would never. Maybe some of you would say my history is a little bit of that life of the guy who went to the far country. I got news for you, Morris. Before I made some bad decisions, but I would never go there tonight. No way at all. I'm not about to go that way. I don't curse. I don't drink alcohol. I don't take illicit drugs. I mean to tell you, I wouldn't dare live in that lifestyle. I don't look at pornography. I don't be involved with music that dishonors the Lord. No way. I don't live that way. And you know what I say to that? Good. Don't start. But many of us in this room who are not living there are guilty of living right here. You say, well, what's so bad about this guy? And that's the question that needs to be answered. Would you go back with me and notice some things about the boy who never left home? The other brother. It says in verse 25 that when his elder son was in the field, he came and drew close nigh to the house. He heard music and dancing. The word dancing there is, there is an extreme fellowship. The idea there is almost like an orchestra is being played inside the house. You can see these Jewish men holding each other by hands, and they're just kicking up their heels. Why? Because my son was dead and he's alive again. There is great joy in that home. And this other boy who's outside cannot believe it. It says in verse 26, he called one of the servants outside, and he asked him, what's going on here? What's these things meant? And he said to him, well, your brother's come, and thy father has killed the fatted calf, because your father hath received him, your brother, safe and sound. He received him, and he was hangry, and he would not go in. What is the sin of the older brother? What's the sin of the kid who never left home? What do we see in his life? Well, first of all, I want you to notice he was explosively ungrateful. There are two things that I just said there. He was explosive and he was ungrateful. Let's take it apart, and I'll move swiftly. It says here he was angry. The word angry here is the idea of a volcanic explosion. The idea there is so loud in volume that he probably was known for it. He was an angry person. And it could be, though it may be something, again, I'm just imagining, it could be that he was thinking, I knew this was going to happen. I knew my brother would probably come home. And he doesn't deserve anything that Dad's doing for him. And he's throwing a party for him. I don't get this. And he explodes. He was explosively unkind. He was explosively rude. He was explosively ungrateful. Can I remind everybody, starting with the guy you're listening to tonight, life is filled with tests. We are tested every day in one form or another. We're tested internally and externally. You say, what do you mean? There are things that go wrong in our life and around us every day of our life. Life is filled with tests. And more often than not, we explode. We get angry. We explode to the point that we are upset. In many cases, we explode on somebody else, because the truth is we're angry in many cases with ourselves. We don't like something in our own selves, and so we take it out on somebody else. I think I could prove that from the book of James tonight. We won't go there. And in some cases, we're mad, we explode because we're mad at God, though in some cases we wouldn't admit it. Are you an angry person? Are you someone who, like, if I took a glass up here, I got a bottle of water, I appreciate whoever put it up here. If I took this lid off, it's filled with water, as you know, and how many of you are getting thirsty right now? And if I took that bottle of water and I just put it up here on the pulpit like this, and I began to shake this pulpit with a great deal of not violence, but a great deal of movement, what would come out of that bottle? It would be water. Does that not make sense? Why? Because it's been shook up. Well, what comes out of you when you get shook up? When life around you gets shook up. Let me ask it like this. Are you an approachable person? Or do people tenderly approach you about something because they're not real sure, quote, what kind of mood you're going to be in? Or how you're on to something. You say, Brother Morris, could you go back and just preach about this guy right here? This is making me a little upset. Don't get mad at me while I preach about the fact that getting mad is being taught by the Lord Jesus. Jesus is saying there is a boy who looked real good, but when pressed, he explodes. Somebody has said that anger is, well, in fact, the Bible tells us anger is contagious. You know, people are talking about COVID and the fearfulness of the contagious portions of it and so forth, and I understand that, and there are things that we have to avoid. Did you know anger is contagious? The Bible says in the book of Proverbs 22 and verses 24 and 25, make no friendship with an angry man, lest you learn his ways. It's contagious. And yet, he who is slow to anger is someone who appeases strife. And Proverbs 15:18 says, a wrathful man stirs up strife, but he that is slow to anger appeases strife. Somebody else said that losing your temper, getting angry, is like temporary insanity. Now think about it. The idea there is many a time when a person gets mad and explodes, and then when they finally calm down, they go, did I say that? I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know what I was doing. Many a couples had to go through this. I'm so sorry I talked to you that way. I just exploded and I shouldn't have done that. I was just out of control. It's like temporary, out of control insanity. I get that. Proverbs 14:17. He that is soon angry dealeth foolishly. Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 9. Be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of a fool. Now, some people do blow up. When they get angry, they just blow up, and everybody in the county knows about it. I mean, everybody in the house, everybody at work, everybody in the neighborhood, everybody knows about it. Lynn and I were in a little restaurant, I think on Saturday, and we were sitting there, and I'm not real sure if it was anger, but it sounded like a couple of ladies behind the counter were getting mad at something, and they got mad at each other, and they were exploding on top of each other, and they carrying on. There's just a little distance from me, and there was a line to go through to get your food, and there was a lady not too far from us. She looked at me, and she raised her eyebrows like, ooh, should I even be in here? That's kind of the way she expressed it. And I said, you're taking your life in your own hands. I don't know. Maybe that's what Lynn said. I don't know. But the truth is, I mean, we've all been around people who are explosive, and they boldly exclaim. They blow up. But then some people, when they get mad, they don't blow up. They clam up. You all right? Seriously, are you okay? As if we're making the situation better by clamming up. We won't talk. Sometimes we don't talk in order to get attention. Sometimes we mumble just to let people know I'm upset. Hollywood makes heroes out of people who are angry. I mean, they do. Guys coming in with blazing guns of any generation time, be they westerns or police guys. I mean, the angry guys, they're the heroes. And kids growing up and adults even watching and growing up, we just tend to think that that's what a real man is. And nobody going to push me around. Let me see if I can remember an example. What about Jesus? When he was reviled, he reviled not back. In his masterful sermon of Matthew chapter 5 called the Sermon on the Mount, he said, blessed are the peacemakers. He also spoke about anger being equal with murder. In fact, you could argue that the first sin committed after Adam and Eve's fall, the original sin, the first sin that we see recorded was Cain. Angry. With whom? Well, the only other person around, his brother. Though others would make a hero out of people who are angry, the Lord Jesus is trying to tell us here that this boy's sin in the presence of the Father is just as ugly as the sins of the prodigal son. Oh, we can spot this guy's sins. He's got the liquor bottle. He's got the drugs. He's selling them, and he's got the wild music and the wild women, and he's got the wild lascivious lifestyle. Yeah, it's all out there, but yet this person over here who has a temper problem, we tend to think, we excuse it. Well, it's just the way I grew up. If you only knew, preacher, what I've had to put up with. If you only understood, I mean, all my life. I've worked with people of hot temper, and if I don't come back, they're going to run all over me. You just don't understand. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who thought himself not to be equal with the Father, but he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. Made himself of no reputation, and he humbled himself. The word humble there is the idea of taking the place of carpet. He didn't use the word carpet, but the idea is being on the floor. He got down below everybody. And what do you do with carpet? You walk on it. What do you do with floor? You walk on it. Jesus put himself in a position of lowliness. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. I don't know about you, but Morris needs to be reminded of this every day. He was not only explosive, he was explosively ungrateful. Did you notice what his dad said to him? He said to him, if you'll notice again in verse 31, and he said unto him, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. You know what he was saying? Can you not picture this dad standing there in the barn saying, Son, what are you so upset about? I mean, everything that I have, I've given to you. I mean, the cattle, the fields, the house, the barn, all that I have is yours. And you're upset because I'm doing something special for somebody else. What do you have here? You have a guy who is ungrateful for what he has. He has an entitlement mentality. And it would be easy for all of us tonight to look at America and say, that's the problem with this country. And it is one of the most glaring problems, that we have an entitlement mentality. Hello, government, take care of all my needs. No, no, no. We were not founded by that. But the truth is, while we're pointing an accusing finger at people on the outside, let's take a look on the inside first. Do I feel like that I have been mistreated? Do I feel like that I've had things go against me? And there's a lot more that I deserve in life. You know what Jesus was really dealing with? Let me put it on the bottom shelf so everybody in this room can know what Jesus was dealing with. He was dealing with a griping tongue. You say, Morris, are you sure? I know it is, because if you'll go back to look at verse 2, you'll see the setting. Look at verse 2. It says, and the Pharisees and scribes, here it is, murmured. They murmured. You know what the word means? You say, I'm not sure I do. Well, just listen to it. Murmur. It's one of those words that describes itself. It means griping, complaining. You say, I didn't come to church tonight to hear this. Well, don't sit there and start griping on the inside of you while I preach about the sin of griping. You say, but I don't smoke. Good, don't start. I don't drink. Good, don't start. I guard what I participate in, and I try to stay far away from the things of the world. Good. Keep it up. Live a holy life. But do you gripe? You say, you're about to find out, preacher, if you stay on the subject much longer. I make it lighthearted, but the truth is it comes extremely dangerously close to every one of us in this room. You know it's true. We gripe about everything. We just gripe. We gripe about weather. Oh, we've really got it bad, don't we? We gripe about traffic. We gripe about long-winded preachers. Can I just throw that one in? We gripe about waiters or waitresses that may not get to our table fast as much as we would like for them to get there. I'm just preaching to myself. We gripe about people that when the light turns green and they're right in front of you, they won't go. Sometimes I wonder, what is so important on your phone that you don't recognize you're driving? Go! We gripe about everything. We really got it bad here, don't we? Yeah, well, preacher, things are going bad. Yeah. Let me take you to parts of the world in which they don't have what we have here in America, and we'd recognize how blessed we still are. Can I tell you that griping and a murmuring tongue has destroyed more churches and marriages than immorality in the church or in the home? Griping where people find fault with everybody else. I wouldn't raise my kids like that. Well, I don't understand why they don't do something. I just don't understand why the preacher chose that. I just don't know why did we choose that color? And I don't know anything tonight, so I'm just making things up. But it's pretty close to home to just about every church I've ever been a part of. I was a youth pastor for 20 years. I love teenagers. I love them. I just love them. And we'd have an activity. Man, we'd go out and we'd have a great time. And I'm telling these kids would be out there running around chasing some big ball or running around chasing each other and having some fun game and, having a good time. But no matter what you did, you'd always have one or maybe two teenagers off to the side saying, "That's a dumb game. I'm not going to play that game." And I'd go up and say, "Hey, come on, man. Come on, jump on in. We're all having a good time." "I'm not going to play." "Well, why not?" "Because it's a dumb game." I said, "Well, look at those 50 kids over there having a good time playing that dumb game. What are you going to do?" "I don't know. I'm just going to sit down here and just going to talk to my friend and play with the ants, on the ground." And then we take a busload of kids to McDonald's at the end of the activity. You say, "Why McDonald's?" I don't know. It's just kind of required. At the end of every youth activity, you'd always go to seemingly a place like McDonald's. We'd pull up and there'd be some kid on the bus. "I hate McDonald's." I'd say, "Well, what is your problem?" "I don't know. I just don't like it." "Well, what do you like?" I like Burger King." Ooh, like there's a world of difference between those two places, And so the following month, I'd take that busload of kids up to a Burger King because I happen to remember. And the same kid would say, "I hate Burger King." So what is your problem? Where did that kid, be it a guy or a girl, where did they learn to complain? They learned from the experts. Because there is a bent, listen now, there is a bent in every one of us that we want things to go my way. And when things don't go my way, it's get out of my way. Do things go your way all the time at work? Of course not. Do things go your way all the time at home in marriage? Of course not. Do things go the way you want to with your parents? Of course not. Do things go all the time your way in a church? Of course not. Do things go the way you want them to go in life? Of course not. We're tested every day. And the boy who looked good on the external, he had a sin problem too. He was a complainer. And Jesus looked at those Pharisees and these scribes and he said, "Let me tell you about a father who had two sons. He had one boy who went off to the far country. And when he repented, the father received him greatly, kissed him all over the place, lovingly brought him home." And that doesn't make sense to you, scribes. You think that you deserve some crowd that's better than that. But there was another boy, he looked good on the outside surface, but he had a problem on the inside. He had an explosive temper and a griping tongue. And it's in the eyes of the Lord just as wicked. And if I can tighten the focus a little bit more, I want you to notice another thing about this boy. He was expressively, number two, expressively unforgiving. If you'll notice what he said to his dad, he says in verse 30, if you'll look at it, "As soon as this thy son was come," which, by the way, Dad, it's as if he's trying to remind his dad, don't forget, "he devoured your living with harlots." By the way, where did we read anywhere where the prodigal son was with harlots? It's not in the text. It does say riotous living, which is not a stretch, Maybe this older boy was thinking, if I went to the far country, that's what I'd be doing. Or maybe he'd been doing some research to find out what his younger brother had been doing. You know, I don't know. But he says, by the way, Dad, don't forget, he's wasted what you gave him with harlots. Your son, you killed for him the fatted calf. He calls him your son. Now look at what Dad says in verse 32. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad, for this thy brother was dead and is alive again. Do you hear it? The father said, son, that's not just my son inside the house. That's your brother. But the brother didn't want to claim him as his brother. Can I just cut to the chase for sake of time? I want to wrap this up as quickly as I can. Do people do us wrong? Yeah. Are there people in this room who've been hurt by other people? Absolutely. Will you be hurt again? Yes. Is there somebody in your world, don't answer out loud, that you've never really forgiven for something that they did to you? Long time ago or recently? Many a marriage has been messed up because people won't forgive one another. They exist under the same roof, but they don't enjoy time with each other. They just endure. They don't enjoy. You know what they're missing out on? The feast. Can I use this word? The party. The spirit of rejoicing. Why? Your brother, your son who came home, I'm not going to forgive him. Is there somebody who's hurt you who you've never given grace to? Paul wrote this in Ephesians 4 and verse 29. He said, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but let it be that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto its hearers. And he goes on to say, and let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice, and be ye kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another. You say, but Brother Morris, the person who hurt me has never asked for forgiveness, and they need to know that they hurt me. You know something? Listen. I can't help but think about what Jesus said on the cross when he said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. But on an even more personal scale, can I remind you of Joseph in the Old Testament, who forgave his brothers for selling him off into slavery down to Egypt? And he didn't hear them say, we're sorry, brother. We're so sorry for what he didn't see them for over 22 years. But when they came to him and when they recognized and heard that it was Joseph there in Egypt, he said, I forgave you a long time ago. What you meant for evil, God turned it about for good. I forgave you a long time ago. Is there somebody that you have been nursing what they did to you? And you've been rehearsing in your mind what they said and what they did? What happens is then you start dispersing. And other people in the house and other people in your world pick up your grudge. You're an uncomfortable person to be around because you won't forgive. The writer of Hebrews said, look diligently, watch out, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many others will be defiled, because it springs up. I had cancer, I mentioned yesterday. But I'm going to tell you the worst cancer of them all. Ready? Here it is. Bitterness. It'll eat you alive. It'll consume you. We say, well, what am I supposed to do? Forgive what this boy should have done. He should have said, Dad, you're right. I forgive my brother. And he could have enjoyed the feast. The most miserable person on the planet are people who walk around with bitter, unforgiven grudges in their heart. Forgiveness is refusing to make somebody else pay for what they did to you. You say, but they need to pay. There is a God in heaven who said, judgment, Jesus, the Word of God says, judgment is mine. I will make them repay. In other words, he says to them, don't seek vengeance. Vengeance is mine. I will deal with them in my own time, in my own way. Forgiveness is refusing to make somebody pay what they owe to you. Forgiveness is a decision. It's not a feeling. Okay, I feel like forgiving them. No, forgiveness is not a feeling. It's a decision of the will. I must do it. I must be obedient. And forgiveness is a process. It usually doesn't happen once, just one time, and it's all done. You have to keep coming back to it. Say, no, I forgave that person. I'm not going to be angry. I'm not going to live with angry bitterness. It's a process. Every one of us in this room has been wronged. But the biggest wrong is the wrong that we do to ourselves when we will not forgive somebody for what they did to us. You're destroying yourself. And if there's only one other thing I can say about this boy who never left home, he not only was explosively ungrateful and expressively unforgiving, he was egotistically unbroken. I said it already that when his dad confronted him with his attitude, it didn't change him. There's no verse here at the end of chapter 15 that says that the older brother realized what he had done. And so he went inside the house and asked his brother to forgive him and welcomed him home and thereby enjoyed the feast, and they lived happily ever after. It doesn't say that. Why? Because the Pharisees and the scribes didn't get it. They felt like, but he's wrong. What are you doing, Father? What are you doing forgiving that boy? Because that's what the Father's all about. He's all about grace. Otherwise, there's no hope for you and me. But the boy who never left home, who has a little bit of a Pharisee in it, who represented the Pharisee, he was egotistically unbroken. You know, friends, hear me. Morris can always see everybody else's sins, and he excuses his own. Put your own name there. It's easy to look down your nose at everybody else and say, I cannot believe they do what they do. When we need to look in the mirror of God's Word and say, oh, God, have mercy. I'm sorry. I'm not what I really need to be. God, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life looking down my nose at everybody else. He was egotistically unbroken. After I preached a Monday night service at a Christian camp, I was going back to my vehicle to go back to my room, and a college girl who was a counselor at this Christian camp, caught me out on the parking lot, and she had her teenage girls with her that would be in her cabin. She came up to me, and she said, hi, good to see you again. Now, it was dark, and so there were some lights outside, but I just turned and I quickly said, well, hey, it's great to be here. So good to be here at the camp. Thank you. And then I took a look at that counselor and I realized who I was talking to. And my thought was, you are a counselor? He said, now, why did you say that? Because the last time I talked with her, she was about 3 years earlier. In fact, she reminded me 3 years earlier, she was a teenager. We had a talk about how angry she was with people back in her hometown. She had heard me preach. And she sat and talked with me in the dining room, and she pounded the table and she said, I will never forgive those people for what they did. I listened to her. I saw the hot tears roll down her face. Raging anger. When she finished, I said, aren't you glad that Jesus Christ did not look at you and say, I will never forgive you? And then I took her to Joseph and told her the example of a boy who had been so mistreated and hated by his 10 other brothers, and yet he forgave them. She sat there and breathed heavy, and I said, let me have prayer with you, thinking nothing happened. I prayed, and I left her. Now, 3 years later, she's a counselor at this camp. And she looks up and she said, I bet you didn't think I'd ever be a counselor, did you? What I wanted to say was, sure enough, man, what in the world are you doing here? But I didn't dare say that. I just said, well, tell me about it. What's going on in your life? She said, do you remember the last time we had a conversation? I said, I do. She said, do you remember what we talked about? I said, I do. I said, so why are you here as a counselor? She said, when you walked away that day, I couldn't get over the fact of what Joseph did when he forgave his brothers and how Jesus forgave me. So she said, I decided I'm not going to live with that. And she said, I began to forgive those people, and I've done so. I wish I could show you the before and after appearance of that girl. The entire week of camp, I never saw her without a smile on her face. She'd be out there running around playing a game with all of her campers. She's just having the greatest old time. I'd see her counseling one of them one-on-one, and she'd have a smile on her face talking with them about serious things. I watched her sing in the counselor choir with a big smile on her face. I saw her play a musical instrument at camp with a big smile on her face. There was one permanently etched on her face. You know why? She was enjoying the feast. She was not living with anger, egotism, and unforgiveness, and a griping tongue. And maybe tonight, we need to go inside and say, I'm going to forgive those people. Or, Father, forgive me for always griping, complaining, and having a temper problem. And start truly enjoying the life that God wants us to live. With this I close. 1 Corinthians 7 and verse 1. 2 Corinthians 7 and verse 1 says, let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and of the spirit, that's attitude, perfecting holiness in the fear of God. You may not commit the sins of the prodigal ever, but many of us are guilty of the sins of the older brother. Let's take care of it tonight. Would you bow your heads with me, please? Heavenly Father, I pray that you'll help us tonight to be honest with ourselves and with you. Help us to recognize, Lord, that in this uncomfortable story that Jesus, you told, it was not meant to make us uncomfortable. It was to show us how we're so prone. We're all prone, Lord, to just having an attitude of complaining, getting mad, being unforgiving. I pray tonight, Lord, for these, my friends. I pray that you'll help each one of us to be honest with ourselves and with you. With our heads bowed, would you all stand with me? Let's all stand. I'm going to ask in just a moment for the music to begin. It may be that you want to sit down. You may not even want to stand up right now. You just may want to go straight to prayer. I'm going to get on my knees behind the pulpit and talk to the Lord about some things. You want to sit down in your chair and pray there? You want to get on your knees here at the front? Do so. Young people, maybe there's some people you need to forgive. Maybe there's an attitude in your life you need to ask God for forgiveness for. Sir, maybe you need to ask God to forgive you for your temper, your anger. Ma'am, the same. A griping tongue for all of us, guilty of it. We put on our best behavior when we come to church, but what are we really like? Jesus is saying, there's a little Pharisee in every one of us. Let's be honest with ourselves and with Him. Father, finish this service as only you can. Help us, Lord, to draw closer to you and enjoy life like never before. We ask it in your beautiful name. As the music begins, would you find that place to pray? Just have